Welcome to the program Something Begins. My name is Shelley Crow, and I'm the author of The Red Ball Quantum Creating Your Reality Through Frequency, and founder of Many Light, a nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the story of your life, providing opportunity for teens and families to participate in impactful service projects around the globe. And today I'm pleased to have the opportunity to have an intimate conversation with Elhavara, a man who is changing the story of many people's lives with his program, The Frequency Upgrade. Welcome, Elhavara.
Wow. Thank you for having me, Shelley.
Well, before we get into what the frequency upgrade is, because I know that we're going to talk a lot about that, I wanted you to tell me the meaning of your unique name.
Oh. That is a story that not many people know about. Do you want the full thing or do you want the short version?
Whatever you're willing to share. It's a very
Okay,
unique
cool.
name.
Right.
I'm just curious about that.
So this name is from a past life. And in this past life, I was part of an order. And I got this name from, this was my name in that order. And the name, it starts off with L, so that means God or the creative force. Hava means the mother of life. It also means breath. And Ra means the sun. It also means to behold or to worship. So put those all together, you get God, the mother, and sort of the sun, the masculine aspect of God, and to behold in that energy.
That's very beautiful.
Elhavara.
And then you recently had a child, and I know you mentioned his name before, but what did you name your son?
That's also a really long name. But his first name is Zion. And I probably shouldn't mention his last name. But his name's Zion. That means, in the Bible, that means where the place where heaven opens.
Those are really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Can you?
So yeah, a lot of mystical names, eh?
Yeah, they are. They are. But I love the meaningfulness of around it.
Right.
My son, his middle name is Benson, and when I was researching that name, it was like son of my right hand, and he was our firstborn son. And
Wow.
so Osmond was his father's middle name, so it's Osmond Benson, son of my right hand. So yeah,
Beautiful.
love that. Okay, I would love to have you, if you're willing to, before all of this came in for you and you started doing the frequency upgrade, tell us about where you grew up and like early life, like before this stuff, you know.
Before the stuff. Right. Well, yeah, there's actually something really significant in my childhood that, looking back on it, that it sparked this whole thing. But yeah, I grew up in a place in the Philippines. I forgot what it's called. And yeah, we came over to New Zealand when I was very young. So I grew up in New Zealand, completely forgot the language. And yeah, that I grew up, my childhood was mostly New Zealand. And I went to this place, um, this place in Auckland. I went through many schools when I was a child, and yeah, I don't really remember much of my upbringing, but all I remember was, yeah, this feeling of there was something more. Like, I think as a child, I was tuning into different dimensions, but I didn't know what it was, and there was no one, there was no one around me, sort of training me in that sort of space. So yeah, most of my childhood I was a pretty quiet boy, and I was already seeking the mysteries, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very introverted. Very, very introverted. Didn't really talk much to anyone, um, apart from the girls at school. And yeah, that's about it.
Did you have any like younger year experiences that like kind of showed you that you were on this spiritual or more mystical path that you can remember?
Um, yes, yes, I did. I did have many of those. There was one significant one where I was with my friends. This happened in the Philippines, and we we created a fire. Right, we created a fire because in the Philippines there's lots of mosquitoes and stuff. So people make fires on the side of the roads all the time. But on this specific day, it was around sunset. Um, we created a fire, and the wind caught the fire. It caught onto this small grass plain. Um, it was sort of a forest, and it wasn't that big of a forest, but essentially this flame caught fire, and the whole thing caught on fire. And obviously, I gapped it because I was like, "Oh shit, I'm in big trouble." But I gapped it back to my house and watched as this fire grew stronger and stronger, and people try to put it out. The whole town, literally the whole town came together with buckets, just like trying to put out this fire. They couldn't put it out. Eventually, they did, but the whole thing was already burnt down to the ground. So, yeah, looking back on that, um, it was about 4 years after that I found out that they built a church on that same ground because the whole thing got burned down.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's a big metaphor for, I guess, what I'm here to do in this life. And yeah, I didn't know that it was going to be a spiritual thing at the time, but looking back, I was like, that is not a coincidence that a church was built on that place. And yeah, for me, it's symbolic because the work that we're doing is sort has that nature. It has the nature of fire, and it catches very easily onto other people. It's like the Buddha said, you know, you can share the flame of a candle, and the candle doesn't lose its flame; it actually grows. So yeah, looking back on it, I was like, wow, that's really crazy because I remember at the time I was the one who lit the matchstick, right?
Right.
And for a child to sort of light a matchstick and then I didn't know fires could go that big, essentially.
Hmm.
So, yeah, looking back on it, that was my first experience of the the power of fire, and I guess I sort of took that on when I started getting into, the spiritual work. That fire is, holy fire is the element we're working with here. And you may have experienced it too. It burns away a lot of old things,
Yes,
right?
it does.
But it also renews a lot of things. And yeah, when it came to the church, the symbolism behind the church, I was like, whoa, that's really funny because essentially, in a way, the work that I'm doing now, it does bring people together in the presence of the creator. So yeah, those are one of the things that happened in my childhood. Also, when I was a child, my dad never showed me it, but he told me that when he was a child, he had the ability to levitate coins. And not that high, but he could move coins with his mind when he was a child. So that always like boggled me. I was like, I want to do that. How do you
I
do that,
just
Dad?
ordered a
He was
book
like,
on Amazon the other day to teach me how to do that.
right. So yeah, that was the other thing. Um, but yeah, that bothered me. Also, we went to church all the time, all the time, and yeah, Christ consciousness is definitely a theme in this work. And yeah, I think at the time also going to church, um, yeah, I remember going to church as a kid. I was like, what is everyone doing? They're like worshiping, like the power is in the wrong hands. The power is in the priest's hands, right? And they're sort of just saying these words like they don't mean anything. And yeah, my first sense of religion was like, everyone came here for God, but how many people are actually connected to God right now?
Mm.
And especially, I don't know if you've known any, not to throw shade on anyone who's Catholic or Christian. At least what I saw was that the people they were in church and the people they were at home were two different people. So I was like, there's something off with this whole religion thing. And there's also something pure about it, because why is it that every Sunday people come to church? Why is it that people are praying? Why is it that, like, what is this? So there's something here, but it felt like the structure was wrong. The format was wrong. Um, and that also played a heavy influence, on, what is God? What is prayer? Why are we drawn to God? Why are we drawn to the divine source? How has humanity done that? How are they doing that now? Is there a purer way to do that? And those are questions that I started asking very young because yeah, things just didn't make sense. I was like, why do we have to? Why is it that God seems like he's outside? Is God a him? Is God a her? Is God a they? Right? And so yeah, I was like, I always remember that. I was like, when you go to church, what I noticed was like people were like praying to this God outside. I was like, that seems really off. I don't know. Yeah, I remember always, witnessing that. I was like, that's off. Like, there's something off about that. It's not quite there. So I never really enjoyed church, as you can probably see. I was very skeptical every time we went in. So yeah, those things sort of shaped me, I guess, on the spiritual path. And in relation to this work, those seeds were already planted at a very sort of young age, very young age.
I have so many thoughts that came to my mind when you were talking about these things. I guess the first one will go back to the story about the fire, because I've been going through your frequency upgrade program for 100 days into it. And I do remember when I was deep in meditation and I was started receiving from source information, and the visualization that came to me was a flame, and I saw that flame just ignite and feel that in my own heart. But then I was looking at a picture of the globe and started seeing these little flames in different countries light, in small
Mm,
communities. And so it was that same idea that that flame, when it gets ignited in you and yourself, that God power that we connect into, and then we share how to access that with others, it is a wildfire.
it is
And
a
I'm
very
starting to see
wildfire.
and feel that.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, that's it's scary sometimes, And I've facilitated groups a lot, and when the energy kicks in, when that fire kicks in, it kicks in. And
I,
sometimes it
I,
can burn, Sometimes it can
yeah.
burn, but with some practice, it doesn't have to burn. It can be very nice. It can be a warm fire.
I'm definitely in the feeling of that right now, as like, all of the blueprints have come in of what I'm going to be doing or what I'm doing. And it's like, I'm just diving in, going along with it. And there's moments of this, like, oh my gosh, what am I stepping into? But then because I'm so connected right now, I feel like this power beneath me, and I always have that message that kind of like cradles under me and says like, you're not alone. You're not doing this by
Yeah,
yourself. And it's like I have
totally.
this saying that I used to have this mantra that I'd practiced before I got into this work, and I was doing the old ways of creation and writing my mantra out and reading it daily and setting my goals and doing my visualizations. But I did have this line that I still love, and it was, the universe constantly conspires to fulfill all my needs, wants, and desires. And I'm feeling the force of that right now, but it's like it's not me doing it alone. It's the universe, like kind of just like just like I'm a little sailboat out there in this big giant ocean, and this wave comes along and just
Yeah,
like sends me to where I need to go. And there's a little bit of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But like you feel the weight of like divine source behind you, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
I got this, I got it. Or at least we
yeah.
got it. Or
You do
who
got
knows?
it. Yeah, it's got it.
It's got it.
Yeah,
I also love
yeah,
how you're speaking to I think what is like a very big feeling for a lot of people right now. I've been sharing the same experience on the spiritual level where, you're going to church and you're seeing this disconnection of people who really desire, I think we desire to have a purposeful life. We desire to have meaning in our life, and we desire a connection with some greater source outside of ourselves. And it seems like everything that I was taught left me with a disconnection and like this like wanting for it but feeling separate from it. And
yeah,
as I've gone through this journey, having that feeling and that opening up in the core and inside of you where you feel like, no, the divinity is right here, God source is right here, and just having the emotions pour in from that is so beautiful because it comes with that power of creation and power of purpose and meaning. And it's like, okay, this is divine. This is it.
yes, yes. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
Capital I, capital
um,
T.
yeah. So, for those people who are tuning in and have never heard of the frequency upgrade, just first off, just explain what this is.
Well, it's. I feel like it would be easier to explain through a story.
Okay.
So let's like rewind time a little bit. I remember a time where I was binging, like Netflix binging Abraham Hicks and Neville Goddard and Bob Proctor and like Joe Dispenza, and listening to all these sort of transmissions on this thing that we call the universal laws. Like, what even is that? There's something that always pulled me to study this. And in my human life at the time, I had just started a business. So my goal was, I need to make sales, right? I need to make sales in this business. So I was working really hard. I was doing the visualizations. I was, making the calls. I was sending the emails. But, deeper part of me felt that this could be so much easier, right? And that's what called me to the laws. And I feel like a lot of the people who might be listening to this feel the same way, where you have something you're working towards, and we study the laws to make that process easier, right? To make the attainment of the desire easier. But the trap that I ran into was that the more I read about the law of attraction, the more books I read, the more audio I listened to, the more confused I became, right? And what I realized was that, yes, there is substance to this. There is a force here. There is a magic here that we can tap into, but no one laid out a system for that. No one's laid out a step-by-step system for like, okay, if you want this thing, you need to do X, Y, Z with your vibration, right? So a lot of the literature out there is, you've got to stay in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You've got to be in the vibration of your desire. Some people say you got to be in your future self. And a lot of these things that, messages that are flowing around in the mainstream, when it comes to actually applying those things, I was having a lot of trouble. And frankly, I was getting pissed off because I was like, surely this is easier than, than affirming and visualizing all the time. And, when you visualize and nothing happens for like a week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks and then months and then a year, some people multiple years, right? So I was like, okay, hold on a second. Let's just slow down. And I was like, there's something here. I need to find what is the mechanism? Because I've had things turn, I've had thoughts turn into things. I've had desires turn into things. I've had synchronicities happen. I'm already in that zone. Maybe I'm already in the vortex, right? That's what I asked myself. And at the time, I was also studying NLP, some healing modalities. What I discovered from NLP is that there is a success, there's a recipe for everything, right? If you get the right syntax, the right steps, you can produce a result. So I sort of went on this unconscious quest of trying to figure out what is the mechanism that makes the law of attraction work. How do I activate the law, right? Because I'm visualizing, I'm doing the affirmations every day, but the law hasn't activated, or else I would be making sales by now, right? I'm doing the work. And I see a lot of people in that, they're doing the work, they're doing the external work as well as the internal work, but their circumstances are still the same. So there's a disconnect that happened for me. And it all changed when I met my mentor, my first mentor, who was an ex Bob Proctor consultant. And we were at a cafe. He bought me lunch and he pulls out his notepad and he goes, "This is how the law works." And he draws this diagram. On one side of the diagram, it's the world of vibration. On another side of the diagram, it's the material world. And he said, whatever you do with your vibration gets reflected in the external world. So if you're in a frequency of hard work, that reflects as a vibration, right? A vibration of hard work reflects as no results, right? So he was like, if you want to make more sales, and this relates to everyone, whether it's a relationship, a business, a project, if you want to get it to the next level, he was like, you need to be in a different frequency. And so I was like, oh my God, I was doing all the work and all the effort, even all the inner work, in the wrong frequency. And he told me something that changed me forever. He was like, you can't outwork the frequency you're in. And I was just like, this whole time, I've been doing all these things to try and activate the law when I've been doing it all wrong. Yeah. Right. So when I saw this diagram, this diagram is in the frequency upgrade as well. It's one of the first modules. When I saw this diagram, I was like, oh, vibration and matter are correlated like mathematically, right? Like E equals MC squared, right? Energy equals matter, what we see with our eyes. I was just like, oh my God, energy and matter are the same thing. That means if I want a certain thing in the material matter, I need to know what that frequency is, right? That's the first step of the frequency upgrade. Know what frequency you need to go into. And for me, I was like, okay, he guided me through it. And, I sort of intuitively got what he was saying. And I was like, oh, so if the vibration of that I've been in the last year of, trying to make things work, which is a frequency of things not working, right? It may be act of making things work, but the frequency of things aren't happening. scarcity, right?
Right.
Um, that was resulting in a world of no sales, no success. So I was like, okay, if I want a world of success, that means I need to be in a vibration of success. Now, the funny thing was, I was already doing this. I was listening to all these success meditations on YouTube. But the thing was, all these things that I was reading and consuming online never got me into the frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find a way to get myself into the frequency. And, I was doing it intuitively at the time. I enter this new frequency knowing that, okay, my frequency is what matter arranges in accordance to now. And I had two 10K deals appear out of nowhere. And at the time, I was barely making I was barely closing $1,000, $2,000 deals. For these 10K deals to come out of nowhere, and instead of me calling the prospects, they called me. Right? They somehow found my number. I was like, okay, this is trippy. What just happened? Like, I don't know what just happened there. You know, you may have had that experience where you just enter some sort of different alignment and shit just starts happening. So I had that first experience and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that was the law. Wait, how do we just activate the law? Oh, I went to new frequency. Oh, to activate the law, you go into a new frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, I just shifted frequency. So then COVID hit. It was a bit unfortunate because those deals required me to make videos for people, so I couldn't. So those deals didn't happen. But when COVID ended, or around the time the regulations started, loosening up again, I did the same process. And in my industry, at the time that I was, the place I was working at, the holy grail was like these 20, 30,000, these 20K, $30,000 deals. Not these 2K deals, these 1K deals, 5K deals. If you got a, $25,000 or a 30K client for a year, that was like so much better. For me, that was impossible because I was like, first of all, I'm new to this. First, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not really that good at sales. And I've never done that before. But my mentor told me that, from that diagram, that whatever frequency you go into, the universe reflects it. So I was like, let's test out the law again. Remember the last time I did this? Oh, okay, let's try that again. So I found myself entering, it was about a week or two. All I did was go into this new frequency. And when I went into that frequency, it felt like, oh my God, I'd finally gotten success, right? I'd finally achieved a good level. All my hard work had finally paid off. Now, in the material world, I didn't have any calls. I wasn't calling out. I was essentially doing nothing, right? So from the outside world, it would have just looked like me sitting on my couch, closing my eyes. But in my inner world, I was entering a new frequency, or in the frequency upgrade, we call it calibrating to a new frequency. It took me about 2 weeks to calibrate fully into that frequency, into phase 3, what we call the point of no return. And I remember hitting the point of no return where I'd been so lost in that frequency where I couldn't go back to my old frequency. I get this message from this girl that I was talking to on Instagram. And she says, hey, I have this mentor and he needs leads, right? So my service at the time was lead generation. He's like, he needs leads for his investment business. I was like, okay, let's, why don't you introduce us? And I get on the phone with this guy, right? And I tell him what I do. And he's like, oh man, yeah, you're exactly who I've been looking for. How much you charge? And then, I ran him through, I asked him a couple questions, and essentially what happened was, if I gave him leads, he'd probably make a minimum of like $200,000. So I was like, you know what, would it be fair if in exchange for those leads, you give me $25,000? And he was like, yeah, sure, man. And this conversation was like, 15 minutes. And, in the industry that I was in at the time, they said that, you have to do these 1 hour calls and ask them lots of these questions and, you got to sell them into it. I didn't do any of that. This guy was just like, yeah, you're the right fit. Like, yeah, I'd love to work together. I sent him the invoice. He pays it the next day. There's $27,000 in my account the next day that wasn't there before.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, wow, what a cool deal. Right? 3 days, 4 days, maybe a week goes past. And I was like, wait, what the? That was the law. Right? I was like, wait, we just did it. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. What did I just do? So I was doing this unconsciously, trying to crack the code to like what I was doing. And I was like, oh, I upgraded my frequency. And I started documenting this process. I was like, I did this, then I did this, then I did this next. So I've done it twice now, right? I was like, okay, I've done it twice, third time's a charm. I started sharing this process on Facebook groups. A woman reaches out to me and is like, hey, do you do coaching? And I was like, what's coaching? I was like, what's that? She's like, can you like teach me this? I was like, yeah, I just did on the post. Do you have questions? She's like, no. Like, can you coach me? So she explained it more. And I was like, oh, you want to pay me for this as a service? And she was like, yeah. So I started getting these messages of people asking me to coach them through this thing. And the first woman that I coached through this, it was under a month, right? She upgraded her frequency when it came to business, and she manifested a deal, or what appeared in the matter was a deal with Netflix, new investors, and she moved into a dream house within about 90 days.
Wow.
The second woman came in and was like, hey, this is really cool. Been studying Neville Goddard. I don't really want to make money, but it would be cool if I made like 50K out of this, And I was like, cool. And I was really sneaky about it because she was like, I want to make 50K. I was like, well, if you're going to go into a frequency, you might as well go into a really big one. So I guided her into a huge frequency when it came to, what she was doing. And it took about 2 weeks of her being in a new feeling, a new vibration. And she had in her company, all these people just hand her deals, right? So by the end of like this month, she had $800,000 worth in consulting deals that she didn't have before.
Wow.
And I remember her messaging me and she was like, this is so funny because it's appeared in front of my eyes. But just being able to vibrate in my own frequency according to my own will is my favorite part of this whole thing. And so I started sharing this with people and more people. And that's when I started gathering data. I was like, oh shit, this is a real thing. Like, there is a mechanism. And it was hard to admit that at the time because I was just, playing around with vibration. But the deeper I looked into it, I was like, there is a mechanism. There's a process to the mechanism. And it works. And oh God, people want to pay me for this too. That was kind of cool. I was like, maybe I should quit the whole lead generation thing. I'll just move into this. So that's what I ended up doing. And yeah, with the same process, going into a new industry where I had no experience, I was just like, I'm just going to go into a new frequency. And it took about, a year, but in the first year of coaching, I made 6 figures. And, going deeper into coaching more clients, the collective client manifestations number now is above $100 million. So that all came from discovering that there's a mechanism and that there's also a skill, there's a system to it. And that system is the frequency upgrade. So that's why I called it the frequency upgrade, because it hints at that story of like, okay, you're currently in an old frequency that's been reflecting in a certain way. And if you upgraded your frequency, you'd start attracting a different set of circumstances. So everyone, right? Everyone in whatever point in life you are, right? Like there's a next level. And that next level, if you know how to access the frequency of that, everything on that level unlocks. So that's how the frequency upgrade was created in a short synopsis.
That's a incredibly fabulous story. I think that creation and manifestation has always been like a big hot topic for people, and the results are so random, and
Yeah.
having been able to do it for yourself once, twice, three times, and then start teaching that to others and watch the same thing happen, like just confirming, like, yep, this is the recipe. Yep, this is the recipe.
Yeah, it was
Really.
mind blowing, eh? And it wasn't mind blowing because people were getting results. It was mind blowing because I thought to myself, what the hell was I doing?
Mm.
Like doing affirmations every morning never got me into a frequency. Visualizing sort of got me into a frequency, not fully there. So so yeah, it was actually an emotional time when these initial successes happened because I was like, oh my god, I've spent like the last year or two of my life just wasting away because I didn't know that I could just shift frequency and things appear out of nowhere. I was like, how much easier is life going to be after this? And yes, life got a lot easier after that.
I'm attesting to that after going through 100 days of your program.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Much easier way of doing that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. In fact, that, if we're talking about the old frequency, I like to describe my old frequency. There's two feelings that were kind of like overall. One of I was always pulling on the boots. It's like, okay, where are those boots? Got to pull them on again. Like you drive, drive, drive. You try every technique. You've got the determination to figure this out, and you're going to just apply
hmm,
every principle available to you
right,
until you figure it out. And it's like
right.
nothing works, and you're like, that's okay. I'm going to put these boots on again. you
Yeah,
just, I'll figure it out. I'll keep going.
I think that's the major collective paradigm. That's
Yeah.
I mean, I was in it. I was totally in it, right? Like I was doing the work, man. And the thing about doing the work that doing the work's cool, but then it becomes uncool when you do a lot of work and nothing happens. I think that's where something inside me just broke, because I was like, this isn't it. Hard work isn't the secret because I've been working my ass off.
I know that story. I think a lot of people do,
Yeah,
and it is kind of like a virtue, especially in like the Western culture of like work hard.
totally.
It's like
Yeah.
no, like you got to work hard, and even if you don't produce results, as long as you can talk about how exhausted you are for how hard you worked, you'll get any credit.
There's like some pride to it, eh?
There is really some pride to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Well, I maybe it's a good time for me to share a little bit about my own experience going through the frequency upgrade. I've been doing this
Yeah,
for,
totally. What was
yeah.
what was your sort of journey behind it when you started
Well,
and
yeah. So, and I love the fact you started with a story. So, mine actually probably began after COVID as well. Before COVID, I had a infrared fitness studio and spa, and I was running that. And COVID hit, and everybody was kind of in that fear state. So going to a spa was kind of out of the question. But it was kind of perfect timing for me. I just closed the doors because my kids needed me at that time. I just was not present for the 4 years before that, building this big business, and they needed me. They were still young, and so I kind of regathered my family and started investing my time and energy back into them. And I had no idea what I was gonna do next, but I also knew that I would not choose anything unless it totally worked for my children, so that I could be home for them after school and I could be like a full-on mother when I wanted to be a mother. And but I also had this like deep desire to have like a contribution to the world. And so it was like I was just kind of like waiting for something to come in, and 1 year passed and 2 years passed and still nothing, and I'm like living on savings, and I'm like, okay, like what's happening here, and I ended up getting into a relationship and getting engaged, and then a number of a while later he's moving out and it didn't work out. And I also at the time had a really close member of my family tried to commit suicide. And so I was dealing with that and dealing with this person just leaving. And I remember sitting down on my couch, plopped down, covered myself in a blanket. I'm ready to just cry my eyes out because I have no idea what's next. And I literally just like said, okay, God, universe, pure source, whoever you are, what is my next step? What do I do? And my phone literally popped on to your YouTube video, the 4-part series of the $100,000 frequency upgrade. And I just sat there and watched it. And then as soon as it was over, a couple hours later, I just hit the let's go for it button. Like I was in. This obviously was the next step because my phone just flipped onto that. And I was like, I don't care what it is, how much it costs. I'm in, and I'm in 100%. And then the same day, I also, same thing happened where I came across a coach who was teaching you how to write a book and publish, self publish. And I knew that I needed to do that as well. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write about. And I don't know exactly what this program is about, but I'm in. And so that's when the journey began for me. And it's been 100 days. And this has been, I've done all kinds of work through my life, all the spiritual gamuts, all the workshops, you name it. Like I've tried it, I've done it, boots on, 100%, going for it, ascension path. And nothing has changed my world like this has. And I was also sitting in my bedroom with eyes closed, looking like a bum the whole time. Just sitting in but, people are like, "What are you doing with your life?" And it's like, I'm meditating. I'm working on frequencies. But I went from this place of like, I remember that old frequency I carried, and it was like, I felt at the time I had nothing to give to the world. I desperately wanted to have something that I could contribute, like something meaningful to give to the world. But then how do I do that and still be like a full-on mother for my kids, and then like have the time to have some kind of business and contribution, and I only want to do if it's meaningful. And like all of that stuff was there in the beginning, and the anxiety about like, okay, how do I manage all this? And how do I grow my kids up spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, provide for all their needs, and do that for myself as a single mom? And like that was an overwhelming frequency that I was in. And about 90 days when I was like fully in, hit that point of no return, having shifts happen, I was a different person, and I remember sitting down with a girlfriend and having lunch, and she was like, "You are so different." She's like, "You don't even see the world in the same way. You're so calm. You have this tenderness about you I've never felt before." And it was, like that old frequency was gone. And I had just come into this place of like feeling peace in my body and feeling such like arms taking care of me from the divine. And then life started changing too. It's like all of a sudden, all of the journals I'd kept and notes and meditations I had recorded were in book format. And I had this dream one night. Well, it wasn't a dream. I was woken up in the middle of the night 3 times. And the first 4 chapters of the book that I wrote were read to me by source. And I'd fall asleep and I'd be woken up again and the same 4 chapters were read. And this happened all night long. I think Source did not want me to forget what I was supposed to write. So the next morning I got up and started writing. And so and things like that have started to happen. It's only been 100 days, but now I have a book that's ready to be published in January. I'm starting on a video course in production. I have the first client that I'm coaching. You and I are going to New Zealand together to have a live event of the frequency upgrade. And just so many things are coming in, but it's not hard work. It's truly guided work. And it fits in.
Ooh.
And it's just this new frequency. It has the energy about it to like for your life, to support your life, to
Mm.
support all those shifts and changes. You know, it's like so easy. It's like stepping onto this like path that just like it's like an escalator. It just like you step onto the escalator and you just keep going up, 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 up. And you're like, wow, this is easier than running up and down those stairs.
That's such a good metaphor, right? Wow. Yeah, that's so beautiful to hear. So beautiful to hear. Yeah, I'm actually curious on my end, because I remember when I've taken a lot of people through this, and I've gone through many shifts myself, many upgrades myself, and there is a process to it. I was just wondering, was there any part of the frequency upgrade, because there's three parts. Um, was there any part that stood out the most? Like, I'm curious because it's different for everyone who goes through it. Was there a specific part that was like the thing that shifted everything else?
You know, I don't remember like any part of it being more significant. It's like each portion of it, right? Like as you're going through the learning, like all of it, like in that, first phase you're in, you're like, "Oh my gosh," and you start like making the shifts and you start especially when you start being able to recognize the frequency and tap into it. And then you realize, I remember the first day I was driving in the car, and all of a sudden I was like in the frequency. I was like, wait a second, I'm not at home on my little meditation couch. Like I'm driving my kids, and they're kind of crazy right now in the car, and I'm feeling it, like fully feeling it,
Mm.
and you're like, whoa, whoa, and yeah. Yeah, and then and that just gets larger, like it just gets fuller and fuller, and then you're having, like, moments of complete chaos, and you're just in the frequency, and you're like, stillness. You're like,
Mm.
anything outside of me, and I think that's one thing that was really big is just, like, forgetting everything in the outside world, the 3D, forget about that, right? Like, you go into work on yourself, and then you have this whole explosion of change that starts to happen.
Mm.
And then you, like, can open your eyes and you realize you're like, "Wow, okay. I'm all good. I'm good," and, like, then the reflection starts to happen, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm seeing things happen."
Mm.
Wow. So I don't think that there was, like, one moment.
Right.
All the moments are precious,
Right.
In the beginning, when I was dealing with those little, barriers that come up, like, "You're not good enough for this," and having, like, days of, like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even deserve to ask for this type of frequency," like, "Oh, like, why would I deserve this?" And then you're
Right.
sitting and you're feeling, like, the divine, like, work with you through that barrier, and you break through it, and then you feel the deserving come in. You're like, "Oh, this is for me." Like, "Oh, like, I was meant for this." There
Yeah.
was so many shifts. Yeah.
That is so beautiful to hear. Yeah. Is it, I'm just thinking of everyone listening to this because I remember being, you may have noticed that you're in a completely different paradigm when it comes to living, is what we could call it. The space you're in now, the best words I came up with to describe the new paradigm was a state of quantum living. And yeah, like for everyone else who's listening, would you be able to highlight the difference in the paradigm of like the old paradigm you were in and like the new paradigm you're in now? Like, what's the difference?
Um, for me personally and intimately, it went from this place of feeling alone in the world, always, like, fighting for what I wanted, trying to get to, like trying to get there, like trying to arrive, trying to make something, it was always a try, it was like moving towards. And even though like I carry a lot of hope in me, like sometimes it's like there's still that piece of you that's like knows that you're never going to get it. Like it's just really it's in there deeply and you're still
It's
willing to try
subtle.
really hard, but it's still there, but you're still
Mm,
really willing to work through it.
mm,
And that completely shifted for me. Um the other day I was sitting in the void and it just struck me. It was like there is an aspect of me that already has XYZ, that's already living that reality. And it was this new frequency that I wanted to step into. And I could so feel it there. And I just knew that I could merge with that because I had already done it. And so I felt like it was already within me. And I had this moment of feeling like wanting to look outside, in the universe to confirm something. And I heard this like, no, no, just look within because the universe is within. And like, it was like opening my closed eyes inside and realizing that that alone feeling was gone, that that trying feeling was gone, that like I already had it. What I was going to ask for, it was already there. And it was so easy just to connect with it, and that connection was also like, I was already in a state of like gratitude and love, like crying over it because there was no need for it. There was no wanting because I was already experiencing it. It was already here for me. And it was just like, wow, like I'm not alone. Like I just felt all the support of, the universe, and everything was there for me, and everything I need is already taken care of. And that feels really good when like you start out in life or you go through life feeling alone and feeling like you have to do something to get to God or to get God's help or to like make connection or have the resources. It's always like, it's always this like searching for something, and then to have the feeling inside of me of like I already arrived. Like I feel so content, settled, and there's a fullness there that I haven't had. Does that answer your question?
yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, I am so grateful that you went through the hard work of figuring out the process and recipe for all of us.
Oh man, it wasn't easy, eh? It really wasn't easy. I went through. Oh God. Yeah, many failures along the process. It was essentially a science experiment. That's
Yeah.
what it was. And I there was no one mentoring me. Well, that mentor at the time, showed me one piece of the puzzle. Showed me the map, the system map, and it wasn't a full manual. I sort of had to create the manual, and yeah, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. But the same thing happened for me, where you know Jesus described it as the kingdom of heaven inside, and every time I went, every time I came across a challenge, like the first time a client came to me and he was like, "Hey, I'd like help manifesting a $300 million deal." I was like, $300 million. Yeah, I squirmed. I squirmed at that number. Well, my first mentor always told me that the only difference between $1, 10,000, 100,000, million, 100 million, it's a frequency, right? So even though I didn't know that, even though I'd never experienced what that is, I'd never been in the real estate industry. Um, I was like, wait, for this client right now, that's a frequency that's already inside him. I'm just, I know how to do that, so I'm just going to focus on the frequency. So this was like the most amazing thing for me because it brought me out of my comfort zone, and I also joined him in that frequency, right? And and yeah, that whole process of getting him into the frequency, there were parts of it that, see, this is the thing that isn't covered in the law of attraction. It's cool to say, hey, if you wanna go into the frequency, like do this and XYZ will appear. But this is the thing that happens. You go into the frequency and then something changes and then chaos unfolds in the 3D, and then you feel like your old self is freaking dying and you don't know what to do, right? Like all these challenges that come with frequency, right? By shifting frequency, because for him, um, it was something that he hadn't experienced too, right? It was a big goal for him that he'd been working towards but couldn't actualize. So, the first challenge, the resistance that comes from the old self, right?
Right.
No one talks about that, right? That's a big part of upgrading frequency because without a way to unplug, to disconnect from that resistance, it's very hard to go into new frequency,
Hmm.
right? So that's why in the first phase of a frequency upgrade, we focus on the void, and you know what that is now. Essentially, the impact of going into the void is you sort of enter this timeless state of awareness. The yogis in India call it, Brahma or Shiva. Um, I'd say Shiva is a more accurate word for it because it's a timeless state. There's no time, no space, no mind, no body, right? Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this all the time. That is the first place we went to, right? Because you can't go into a bigger frequency if like your old self is sort of having a tantrum, right? Sort of like having a tantrum and it's like, oh no, right? There's a lot of fear that comes up when you're going to a new frequency, at least for some people. Um, so yeah, that's the first part of any upgrade. It's to clear the slate, right? An artist always starts off with a blank canvas. So that was sort of the first thing we did, and the impact of that is, well, I'd like you to describe the impact of going into the void because sometimes it's hard to communicate that, but you're sort of fresh out of it. What did it do for you when you could access that timeless place?
Well, I can totally identify it with, that part of you, the resistance part of you, that it's like, oh, this is what I want to create. And then it's like all of the old frequency, all of the old thoughts, all the old feelings. It's like, well, you don't deserve that. All of this stops, it's like, why would you
Yeah.
deserve that or this or that or this? And I remember hitting those, and I would journal about them like, oh my gosh, or I'd call my brother and I was talking to him about it. And, I was like, how am I going to work through this? But what was also really cool to experience is when you go into the void, especially how we've been guided, through the coaches in the program, it actually allows that just to go away too. Like
Yeah.
it's easy to set that aside when you go into the void, and then when you're spending some moments just, even just barely starting to feel the new frequency, like you don't have to let go of all the old stuff. Just kind of like pet this new frequency. Just introduce yourself to it, just little dog that comes in, you're like, I'm just gonna pet your back, like I just want to touch you, just have like that. But that touching of that, it like opens up the door. And because you're working with the void, it almost, I feel like there's a teaching aspect of the void itself, where when you hit
It
those levels,
is.
there's a teacher, a divine teacher in there that says,
Mm-hmm.
okay, just remember this is your habit energy. This is your old habit energy. And here's something else to consider. And so it's just like this like moment of like learning how to connect with something different. And then
Yeah,
because you're touching into that difference so many times through the upgrade process, you get more and more used to it until it just starts to envelop you. And those old feelings
exactly.
are easier to set aside. And then pretty soon you're like, well, why did I think that anyways? You know? And you know that
Yeah,
like, I've heard you say before, like the frequency that you carry also is what gives you the thoughts, feelings, and emotions you have. And so when I had stepped into the new frequency at some level, maybe it was 50% or, whatever percentage I was kind of like in that most of the time, it did have a completely different energetic resonance. I had different, feelings. I had different thoughts. I thought about myself differently. I felt love for myself and my kids and everybody else differently. And the more I embodied that new frequency, the less all that old stuff even mattered. And it was the easiest change of like spiritual work I'd done. It's like I didn't have to go do all the
yeah,
shadow work. I didn't have to remember all the
yeah.
daddy issues. I didn't have to like I didn't have to use these techniques to say this a certain way so that I could bypass the subconscious mind to get to like the like
Yeah,
all of that all of that is the old frequency, and
yeah,
it's
totally.
not part of the new. And so when you learn just to invite that new in, and then you learn to experience it in your body a little, and then that grows and it grows, and then pretty soon like you're feeling a cellular level shift of everything in you, and then one day you're like, oh, I'm a new me. Like Joe Dispenza says, that become a new person, like through this
Yeah,
process I actually became a new being.
yeah.
Everything about me shifted.
Beautiful. Yeah, that is a perfect description. Yeah. Something that I'd like to point out is, the whole, what I've noticed through this work is I think there's like this collective paradigm that, our bodies and our minds is like a computer, but it's not. It's not a computer. What I've discovered is that the body, the mind, the energy field is a radio state. It's a radio dial. It's like a radio antenna.
Mm.
So, and I think that's where the whole shadow work and like, and I'm not throwing shade on shadow work or techniques and all those things. I just feel like there's this paradigm that people are bought into, and I feel like it's come from the very um, early days of self development and NLP as well, where you can reprogram your mind and you reprogram your body, reprogramming, right? So the metaphor under that is that the thing is like a computer. In actuality, we're just big fat energy balls. We're energy donuts. If you look at the shape of a torus field, it literally looks like a donut. And that's what I discovered through the work is that, oh, that's why the whole, healing techniques and all that stuff that aim to reprogram the subconscious mind doesn't quite get you into the frequency because we're big energetic donuts. We're not computers, right? We can connect this energy donut into already existing planes of existence, already existing timelines. And when we do, this donut that we're made of, right? It's like a radio antenna. We can tune into whichever frequency we want to. And I feel like that's why it's easy. Cause yeah, and I wanted to share that because I feel like some people may be asking like, what, how is it that easy? Right? It's easy because on an energetic level, you're more like a radio station. You're more like a radio receiver, a radio transmitter that can tune into different frequencies. And I feel like if people got that mindset shift early of like, okay, the way reality works, it's not like this computer thing. It may be, and you could look at reality that way. But to make going into a different vibration easy if you saw reality and yourself as a radio dial that has access to multiple radio stations, in this case, infinite radio stations, representing timelines, different versions of self, different realities. That's what makes it easy. And I remember at the beginning of my journey, because my mentor described frequency like that. He was like, "This is the thing. You don't have to manifest. The matter is it's a it's a it's a secondary reality. The first reality is frequency, right? And the thing with frequency is that this frequency that you've been in, it will always exist. You don't have to continue to vibrate there because there's another frequency where you're more successful, more aligned, more abundant, more fulfilled. That frequency is also there. What if you could tune your energy field to a different, already existing frequency? You don't have to visualize that frequency. You don't have to work your way into that frequency. All I had to do was tune into that place, like you said, that was already inside me. And I feel like that's a secret that I want to share. I want to share with everyone, these frequencies that, like these dreams that we have, these goals that we have, the frequency of that thing is inside you right now. You won't find it outside, right? So the shift is a inner shift, and it's a millimeter shift, right? You may have noticed that too, right? Like old Shelly still exists, but
Right.
you've chosen to be in this frequency, and you have the power to choose now. You know the mechanics behind it. So radio stations, frequency.
Um, I think that's a perfect way to describe it. Yeah, definitely. And also, I've noticed the ease of that tuning. So, through the 90-day process, like it took some time to learn that. But the other day, it was like, oh, here's a new frequency I'd like to tune into. And it's like, it didn't take that long to kind of like spin the dial. It was like, oh, right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
There, bam, bam, right on. My music is
Boom.
going. And it's like, oh,
And then you
yeah.
can turn up the volume too, right?
Yeah,
Once
yeah.
you're in, you can turn up the volume. So yeah, it's
Oh,
that easy.
yeah.
It's easy when you think about frequency in that way. I feel like people ask me that, why, how did you do it? Like, why is it easy? It's because of that. Like the way I think about frequency is like a radio station. And I remember even literally, one of my grandma had a radio station in her room. So I, I remember after that, maybe a couple of days after that conversation I had with my mentor, I looked at this radio station and I was like, okay, there's multiple channels. It goes from 0 to like 200. Right now, I'm like on 80. I'm actually want to get to 150. Right. And I was like, I sat there. I literally looked at this radio station because, I was trying to integrate what I just received from this cafe meeting. And I was like, oh, right. It does already exist. I just may not be able to access it right now, but let's find out. Let's try to access it. And that's when the journey began, right? That's when the frequency upgrade starts. It's when, like you said in your story, when you notice that, oh, there is another possibility. There is a higher timeline. There is a new self. What if you could start accessing that? And even in just asking that question, you'll start accessing it.
Hmm. Well, I've loved the conversation that we've had today. And I want to put a couple plugs in for people who have really felt something stir within them, who've been searching for this, like I felt like I was searching for this, and Elhavara was searching for this and found that answer. And if this is something that you feel drawn to and want to learn more about, um, there's a couple options available. You can just jump right in to your own frequency upgrade. This is a 90-day program. Is it still 90 days? Is that what you're doing now? Do you
It's
want to tell
yes, it
everybody?
is.
Okay.
It is 3 months. So yeah, the best way I found to do a frequency upgrade, it usually in the beginning, it was I did frequency upgrades with people in about a week, but that was too intense. It was not scalable as well. So um, I also found out that to fully like not just enter a new frequency, but to be able to have the skill to do it again in the future, it usually takes about 90 days to fully lock in, like on a very deep level. So the first month or the first 30 days of a frequency upgrade, what we do is we get you into a place of pure timelessness, pure emptiness. That will set you up to be able to fluidly move in the quantum field. So that's the first part of a frequency upgrade. The second part is, me and Shelley talked about it a lot, is that you learn how to access it. So the next 30 days is focusing on one, finding, right? One of the coaches will help you, will give you the exact frequency you need to be in to align and attract the desire that you have, or the timeline that you want, or the new version of self that you want to embody. So the second month is purely focused on learning the art of accessing. So once you know how to access a frequency, the cool thing about that is you can do it with other frequencies. An example of that is, that 25K deal. That was the first frequency upgrade of mine. The next frequency upgrade was making my first 100K. Then the next, then the next, then the next. And then at some point, I was like, wait a minute, what if I go into $1 million frequency? And I did the same process because I knew how to access frequencies in the field. I went into a millionaire frequency, and that was when my first $1 million deal came. So that's phase two, the next 30 days, right? Knowing how to access the frequency. The last 90 days is once you know how to access that frequency, we lock you into it to a point where you can't return to your old self, your old vibration. You're fully locked in. And it's usually at that time when, like you, Shelley, you were describing some of the things that happen in phase three, some of the deeper shifts, some of the awareness that is created there. So that's what the frequency upgrade is. It's a 90-day process. And for those of you who would like to participate in that or feel the calling, Shelley, if you could just link them to my YouTube channel, there's a link in the description of every video on there. And um, yeah, you can message our client concierge Josh, and he'll take care of you.
Perfect. Also, if anyone is just ready to dive in for some deep work right now and learn and experience this firsthand with Elhavara, we are going to be in New Zealand December 3rd through the 10th doing an intensive. And it's just getting into the basics of this, practicing together, a really deep, intimate experience and kind of getting your feet wet in it. So that's also an option. And of course, reach out if you have any more questions. And Elhavara, thank you for sharing all of this with us today. I just have so much gratitude being a seeker in my own life, for the same spiritual quest, different, my own, and then coming into this. I'll share one more story. I remember um, when I first reached out to you many, many months ago. I remember watching
Yeah.
some videos, and I had to track you down. Like you were not anywhere online. I'd gotten your name from the oddest place, but I heard your name and I knew I needed to find you. So I ended up, I mean, I searched online and finally found this woman who had spoke about you and then had to track down how to get hold of her. And I was like, I need to get a hold of this man. How do I do it? So that took about a week to get to you. And I remember the first thing I said to you. I said, I understand that you have this program and you're advertising it with all these people, making all these big deals, these $1 million deals coming in, and but I was like, I can tell there's something deeper. There's a spiritual work behind this.
There
Like
is.
I want to know about that. And I think a little bit of that was shared in a little bit earlier today in our conversation. Um,
Yeah,
and I really appreciate that piece of it, because to me, it's like, I know there's a lot of people, everybody out there wants to manifest the desires of, like the money part of life, right? Like we all want resources. We all want to have to be able to adventure and do what we want to do. But there's this other aspect of like meaning and purpose. And
totally. Yeah,
I love that this process is dual when you're going through it.
it
Both
is
of the
dual.
pieces.
Yeah, and we talked about what you're talking about, the way that people come, at least in the past, is they get attracted to the money and all the cool deals and sales, and we talked a lot about sales and money and this, but yeah, there is something deeper, and that's why I do this, and the deeper part of that is at some point through this process you will be able to fully experience God, the creator, inside you and all around you and everywhere, but most of all inside you. So behind all the fancy marketing, language and messaging, the whole point of this is so that you can experience that kingdom of heaven within. That's where this all leads to. It all leads to source. And yeah, that's cool that we touch on that as the last part, eh? That is the purpose of this. The spiritual aspect. And I've experienced this too, because making the money and the success materially, that wasn't the most fulfilling part of it. It was discovering the mechanics, the paintbrush of the creator as me, as you. And I feel like that, we can only talk about that in words, but the aim of the frequency upgrade is to give you a like visceral experience of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here. That was a fun convo.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll talk to you again soon, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, cool. See you,
Bye.
Shelly.
I wanted to share with you a little bit more of the conversation that happened after the interview. It was really magical. So here it is.
Oh, righty tighty.
Nice job. That was incredible.
That was so good. That one deep.
I love that. That was so good.
How long was that? 1 hour 22. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Nice. I really appreciate everywhere that went. That was perfect.
That was perfect, eh? That really was perfect. That was. Thank you, Sauce. Thank you, Sauce. Yeah.
I do have to admit, one of the moments that stood out for me was when what the call we had not last time, the time before, when you took me into the void, and it was so reverent. It was almost like a reverent prayer. Like I've had Michael taking me in, and it's like sitting down and it feels more like meditation, but it just felt like this sacred prayer. And it just shifted things even more for me. It was like, whoa, like I've been connecting with the divine this whole time, but like this new feeling of like the reverence of it hit me. And I was so
Yeah.
appreciative to that, that aspect that you brought in, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like yeah, that reverence part that came from yeah, taking people through this whole thing, and watching people too, and going really deep into myself. That oh, this is what I found. This may be an extra part of the episode. Maybe we can edit it and maybe not. Um, but yeah, at some point in the journey, I'd enter a frequency. And you know what it's like to go onto a frequency. It feels freaking great.
Yeah.
I realized that this frequency was coming from something, right? Infinite source, God, whatever you want to call it. So that's where the whole receiving phase 2 process came from. I was like, oh, this frequency is not mine. It's a gift. Like there's something in the cosmos that has made infinite timelines available for us.
Mhm.
Some people may call that the mother. Some people call that the field. But I started to really feel the presence of that power, that creative power. So, when you receive a frequency, whenever I receive a frequency, I'm like, yo, Source. Source has like sussed me out. I'm like, damn, Source. Whenever the frequency is real young, I'm like, damn, Source.
You
So
know,
then there's a rev.
I think that shift happened for me. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Uh, I think what happened was when I started on this journey, it was like, you know how you start out wanting something. You're like, I want to create. I want to have this. I want to, at least I
Mm-hmm.
started out there. I was like, I want to create money. I want to create this lifestyle. I don't want to have all these bad feelings that, it's like you want something and you want to get rid of baggage.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
But at some point in time, when I realized that this was actually part of my being, that my physical
Yeah.
body was created to vibrate the frequency, to manifest into the
Mm-hmm.
physical. And I realized that this
Mm-hmm.
was how I was created. Like I was created by Source to do this. It was part of my
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
And that just meant that, like, no, I don't have to want and crave and like try to get stuff. Like it's all for me. Like all I have
Yeah.
to do is ask the divine, and it's like, here you go, here's the frequency. And that shifted it because it was no longer this desperation in me that needed something to fix me and needed to get rid
Mm-hmm.
of stuff to fix me.
Yeah.
And then it was like,
Yeah.
no. And you've said before, like, God loves us so much that if we want a shitty life, he gives us a shitty life. Well, I mean, it's not that he
Yeah.
gives it to us, it's that that's what we are resonating. That's what our energy is. And so that's what we get.
Yeah.
And how beautiful is it that in the day and age that we're living in, this information is coming in. And it is so
Mm-hmm.
easy to go, you know what? This is habit energy, and I can set it aside. And I could go to Source and say, this is what I want. And he'll just say, him or her, Source will just be like, here's that frequency. And you can vibrate it into your body and have it feel every like part of your being. And then it just grows and grows and grows. And before it even happens in the physical, you're already feeling it with so much love. And like
Yeah.
you're just like, wow, this was meant for me. Like,
Mm.
it's a part of me. It was out always available to me.
Mm.
And it's just beautiful to know that, like, no, this is what my body was created to do, you
Yeah.
know.
It's a whole shift.
And it's like, and it's as easy. I use the description of like being a mother and birthing a baby. I don't have to like figure out how to create the baby inside, like I don't have to be like, okay, grow that arm, like let's go into the heart. It's not hard like that, right? Like, no, my body was created to create babies, and my body was created to vibrate frequencies.
Mm.
And now I finally get choice because I have the awareness that choice is available. And I
Yeah.
love that. That feels like such love.
So good, eh? So good. So good. Yeah. Yeah, what you touched on there, that is the second thing I realized in this whole, in this work was that yes, there's a field, but there's also something in the field that chooses. And I was like, oh my God, how blessed is this thing in us that can choose? And later on in the journey, I was like, oh, that's like the creator within us. That's connected to the greater creator. It's all one creation. But that's, yeah, when I started connecting with that, I was like, oh my God, like we've been given the creative ability to choose something out of infinity, to choose something out of the field, and better yet, the field itself gives it to us in the form of experiences, in the form of synchronicities, in the form of manifestations.
Right.
And I was just like, that whole, I call it the holy trinity of like creation, right? Like the field where you choose the infinity, the one who selects, and then the thing that brings that force into form, but they're actually the same thing. And yeah, to speak of reverence, when you start doing more frequency shifts and upgrades and interacting with the field and discovering that, oh, I am part of the creator, this is who I am, right? This is what my body was made for. I was made to create. There's a deep ancient timelessness to that. It's like that was our original form,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
That was our original form. That's where the reverence comes from. It's because it's the remembrance of who we are and what we're, the what we're part of. And like, if you, I sit in that so many times. Every time I go into a frequency, I'm like, thank the Lord, right? The Lord, God, the universe, whatever you name it. But I'm just like, thank you for this entire thing. This entire thing is just freaking beautiful. And yeah,
There
that is where the reverence comes from.
I think there's a smaller piece too, like another shift that happened in there for me from, that place of needing, craving, wanting, and then getting, feeling that frequency. And then like, now realizing I am the creator, but then having this moment, I remember having this moment of going, you know what? I'm really not as intelligent as I think I am in my 3D form. Like, how about you show me what frequency you would like for me? Like in the field, in the quantum, it was like, show me another possibility that I would love. And
Mm,
it was like I was asking my soul, I was like, higher self soul, like you choose, you choose.
mm,
And that shifted things for me so much because when stuff started coming in at that point, and it was the frequency you're feeling, but it also had the visuals and images or voices or all of the stuff that came in. I remember this moment. It was like I didn't know the impact that I could make. I had still felt like even though I had made all of these shifts and I felt so much more powerful and like more control and like yeah, I could do this. But then when I let higher self and soul show me the capacity, I was in tears. I was like I had no idea the impact I could make on the world and it was like thank you for showing me that. Like if everybody knew the impact their one little being could make, right? The magnitude it could live at. And I also realized that that was just like a small step that once you get on
mm.
this path, that even opens up more. And it was like I was seeing these like this impact into the future, like this drop of water going in and like just the ripples going out and started seeing all the souls it would touch and these ripples would start from those ripples. And I was blown away. I was like, I had no idea one person could do
Yeah.
that, let alone me, myself. And it was
Mm,
so inspiring to see that. It was like, yeah, I do want to live that life. Yeah, I want it to be like that. And it also didn't feel like it was something big and hard I had to do because it was like it had an ease about it because I'm working with source and it was like, yeah, you could do that, you know? And I was like, I think I want to. Yeah, I think I want to. Yeah. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Very cool.